lovely friends. This is Michelle, the Southern Shell, and I am here because I am going to make a tray, a three-tiered tray. I have ladies' tea coming up on Saturday, and so I really want to have a tray on my table that sort of kind of matches my china. So I decided, well, what better thing to do than make one, and let's just go for it here. So I'm using my my J Diction epoxy resin, and it does take 24 hours to cure. So I am going to get this started. I have my part B and now my part A. They are equal parts to each other. And I try to keep these in alphabetical order so I know what cup I used for what, so I can make up more if I need to. So what I have to go in my trays is I have some dried flowers and I have some cream little pearl like beads on a string, so I can kind of lay them out. I'm thinking kind of like a little necklace, or just to give a little bit of something extra to that tray. And now I'm gonna mix. Let me keep it in alphabetical order. I'm gonna mix this for like 3 minutes, and I'll be back. I thought it was funny because I set the timer for 8 minutes, not 3 minutes, but I'm glad I caught it when I did. It's not a big deal. Your hand starts to get tired, so you know when your time's about up. But you're gonna mix this slowly, and you're just going to make sure that everything is incorporated in there. You want to make sure that the cloudiness has gone away and you don't incorporate any more air bubbles. So now I'm mixing up my second batch of resin. The part B is the hardener, and part A is the resin part that you're going to mix in, and the chemical reaction is going to start. Once again, you're going to mix it for 3 minutes. You want to make sure that you've gotten everything out of your cups that you possibly can. They're clear when you put it in, and as you start mixing and turning it, it starts to get cloudy. When that cloudy mixture is clear again, you're ready. Now I'm pouring this at high level, and I'm pouring it slowly into these trays. I did use some packing tape before I did this to make sure there wasn't any dust in them, and I'm trying to get every drop of resin out of there because I don't want to waste any. Resin is not necessarily cheap. Moving on to cup number 2, and I'm going to just make sure that the bottom of my molds are covered with a good base of resin. And what I'm doing now is I'm just lifting those little molds just a little bit to help that resin flow out to the edges. I want to make sure that that whole bottom is covered, and I'm just using my stick now to just help pull it to the edge, and a heat gun will help loosen the resin up a little bit. If it's been sitting for a little bit, it does start to thicken up. The heat gun will help it to actually get thinned out a little bit more so that you can maneuver it. So now I'm taking my little roll of pearls. Well, it's not really a little roll. I had picked this up at Michael's several years ago in the wedding section, and I picked up a roll of these cream-colored ones, and I picked up a roll of some white ones. Well, when I just cut off little strands, each one's going to be a little different size depending on the tray, and I'm just laying them down like you have a necklace just propped in there. I did not have any rhyme or reason of which direction I wanted these to go. I just put them in the molds themselves. Here I have the dried flowers that I've used, and I got these from walmart.com. I will leave that link below as well. These are beautiful. This was about, I think it was about $8, and it's a pretty good sized little tub. And I just took pieces and I started laying them down. I'm like, oh, you might want to trim those little edges off before you get them in there. So I started trying to trim them beforehand, but you can see me in there just trying to give a little cut while they're actually in the tray. I'm trying to be as careful as I can because I did take off my gloves playing with these little pieces of the dried flowers is fiddly, and it's more difficult when you have gloves on. So I'm trying to be very careful here. Now there's several pieces of different things in this tub of dried flowers, and so looks like little buds that hadn't opened yet, and I thought that would be really pretty in there. So I put those down in there, and I just started snipping the tops off of them. And you can see that I finally started snipping the tops of the flowers off before I was laying them in. Wow, what a concept, right? So this was a very long process. So this is actually sped up quite a bit, and I didn't think you'd want to watch me do this for an hour as I'm trimming and placing these things in here. It didn't have to take so long. You could have just went through and just, kind of dropped them everywhere, but I did want them to be laid out so you could see the pretty parts, because when you're doing this and you take it out of your mold, the part on bottom is actually the top. So I thought. So with this one, it was a little different. The bottom tray is the only one it actually made a difference on, because in the center where the posts go, the mechanisms and the hardware, there we go, it actually had a lip on the inside where when you put the bolt in to screw it on, it had a little indention for it. And that was on this side of the mold. So, I was able to take care of that and get it fixed. I used my Dremel, and I just kind of drilled down a little bit more on the other side, and it made it just fine. So all of these little petals, as I'm pulling them off, you can see here is very tedious. I didn't want to put a whole flower in there because they're very thick, and I could only really just do the petals, and some of those petal pieces still popped up on the top of the resin, so I had to go in and clean it up after they were fully cured. But that's fine. That's what this is about. I'm learning here, and excuse me, I'm taking you along my learning journey. I'm using an alcohol pad container to actually help scoop up those little petals. They wanted to, hang around on that little silicone sheet, so that it just made it more difficult to pick them up. But I was determined to get all my little pieces up and into my mold. So here it is, day 2. I mixed up my resin. It's been sitting for about 20 minutes. And you can see my little butterfly mold down there. I was painting on my mica powder while my resin was sitting. I should have moved it, but I didn't. I figured I would end up sitting there and doing some more of those butterflies. So I'm taking the resin that I mixed and putting it on top of the cured pieces already. And I am getting ready to do this bloom, and I've tried them, and they've turned out just not as pretty as some of the others that I've seen.
And that's, you know, it's a whole different ball game when you're doing blooms. So I wanted it to be light. So I have sandal alcohol ink, I have bubble gum, and I have white. Those were the three colors I'm using for my blooms. And I figured the sandalwood would help with the natural colors of the background for the flowers. The gumball is a little pink, so I went ahead and used some white alcohol ink on top of that. What I did now was I created my thicker resin to actually make my blooms. And I used the white alcohol ink, a white pigment, and some crystal white mica powder. So once I got that thicker mica powder mix into my pastry bag, I squeezed the air out, cut a small hole in the end, and this started making petals all the way around, starting in the middle, working my way out to the edge of the mold and getting those all done. Once I have those done, I'm going to come back in onto the larger molds, put some more petals towards the outside so that I know that I have petals all the way out there and I won't have a lot of a blank space. Now it's time to start the movement in these trays. I'm going to take my little silicone tool and I'm just going across from each other, starting on the outside of the mold, pulling it in to the center. When I do that, I'm going to start on the center of the mold and I'm going to pull it out to the edge. This gives different shapes and it helps to start your resin moving around. And I'm going to do this with all of my molds. And it's already pretty thick, so I'm going to have to come back in with my heat gun. And not only is that going to help me get any air bubbles out, but it's also going to help me get that thick resin moving again. And because if it's too thick, it's not going to have a lot of movement, a lot of blooms. So I'm just going to come in, I'm going to blow it, and you can see here if you heat it up enough, your resin is going to start moving, and I'm trying to just get it in the center and blow it out. I don't want it to be totally wacky on this spot.
Okay, y'all, it's the next day, and I have my big trays. And so let's see, I can see some blooms underneath that have come out. And wouldn't that be the case that with my flowers and my pearls, that this be the best bloom I've done? Very possible. Now, if you remember right, this one I had to make up some new resin, so I don't know how well that bloom made. Ooh, and it went over. Look at that. Okay, well, we've got some cleanup there. That is okay. We will start with the small one. Well, that's not bad for the tray. I do have some blooms in there. Not quite what I expected, but perfect for the top tray. Our medium one.
It's coming out of the molds very easy. I'm not having any issues or dealing with any spots that it's actually sticking, except for where I did some user air and it went over the mold just a little bit. So I'm just going to go ahead and get the large one out of the mold, and then we're going to go ahead and flip these over and see what they look like. I'm excited about these because I can see the blooms already.
All right, let's get started on the medium one. And of course, these flowers all come in on the back and all. I don't have to make them even, they're going to be on a tray, but I don't want them hanging down either. Okay. Wow, it bloomed. And my petals moved. They all kind of moved to one section there, didn't they? Not quite sure how that happened, considering I tried to put the beads in between. And I tried to have that dried before I put the back on. Maybe I put them there. I don't know. But the bloom looks really pretty. Oh, the bloom looks gorgeous. Absolutely. Figures. The first bloom I get kind of right. You have stuff on top of it so you can't see it all the way. But I wanted that to, I'll have to turn it back over so that it will finish curing on the other way. Now let's see the big one. Oh, that bloom is beautiful. It's the layers. The layers are just gorgeous. I think this is going to make a perfect tray for what I was looking for. It has the colors I wanted. Oh, I just love it. Okay, so this is my bottom tray. And here is my middle. And here is my top. Oh, I'm in love, guys. I just love it. I think it turned out awesome. And now that I know I got the blooms right, I'm gonna try it again. Yay! Oh, wow. Wow, wow. Wonderful. So thank you for joining me, guys. I love it when you take time to spend with me crafting. Let me know what you think of this. It's going to be a 3-tiered tray for the center of my ladies' tea table. Thank you so much for joining me today. As always, stay safe. God bless. Bye for now. Look at the way my tray turned out. Oh my goodness. This 3-tiered, it is supposed to be like a tea cake stand. It can be used for jewelry, whatever. But look at that with the dried flowers, the pearl strands, and the 3D bloom effect from the resin. You see the blooming effect from the resin. Oh, I'm just tickled the way it turned out.